Hi there, short film fans. Welcome to another episode of the Cameo Launch Short Film Podcast. I'm your host, Nigel Morgan. Joining me today is Aleah Marrow, the writer, producer, and director of our most recently reviewed short film, Wish Hill. Aleah is going to talk to us about what the film's about and her background in filmmaking, how she came to make this particular film and why she made it, and speak to us a little bit about her journey going forward as a filmmaker moving into a new era. Aleah, thank you so much for joining us. How have you been?
Thank you so much for having me. I've been doing pretty good, doing pretty well since I first met you at Aesthetica Film Festival.
Yeah, Aesthetica
Oh,
last year, yeah.
yes, exactly. So, but all is well, working hard on new projects, working hard on current projects. So it's been awesome to just continue to create art.
Excellent. And yeah, I mean that your film was one of one of my highlights from that festival.
Oh, wow.
We spoke at length. We've spoken at length on the platform about how much we loved Aesthetica, and Wish Hill was one of my highlights of that. Primarily because it was in the one of the family friendly showcases, so I was able
Yes.
to go watch it with my wife and my son, and it was like poetry basically.
Mhm.
It was so nice. It was just such a cool sort of cinematic experience to have as a family, and the
Yeah.
fact that it kind of focused on a really tight bond. We'll get to
Mm.
you actually kind of outlining what the
Okay.
film's about in a
No
second, but
problem. No problem.
just the fact that it kind of outlined this really tight bond between two brothers that was so peaceful and just so pure, and that it was born out of one of the most devastating periods in recent global history. But yeah, just for anyone listening who's not familiar with your movie, can you just give us a little bit of background on what it's about and why you made it?
Yeah, so Wish Hill is a story about two younger brothers who go on an adventure to a special place where they believe wishes come true. And these two younger brothers take a trip. They leave and they go on this self-discovering journey to Wish Hill. And I made this film because we were actually in the middle of the pandemic, COVID-19, and I believe the whole world was shut down. And so actually at the time that I wrote the film, I was in the midst of a career change. I used to play professional tennis. And so while I was writing this, because during quarantine, I was writing, everything was shut down. I wasn't able to go to the tennis courts. I wasn't able to go work out except for running on my own. So I actually kind of picked up my writing in this moment. And in 2017, I got hit by a car.
Oh, geez.
And so it's a blessing to be alive. And I had to go through a bunch of therapy to get better. So I kind of connected back to that moment actually when I was writing the film, because my whole world was shut down and I had something going on. And so when we were faced with the pandemic, I noticed how people were really struggling to be still. And so that's kind of how I brought the two together, because it actually came more from that, but I was able to relate it because like everybody can relate to this. And so I just kind of brought it together. Yeah.
Right.
Mhm.
That's really interesting. I'm sorry all that stuff happened to you. It must have been
Right.
really tough
Yes.
to work through.
It
Um,
was. It
yeah,
was.
yeah. But at the same time, being able to harness that into
Mhm.
an experience you can share with people,
Exactly.
I think is a fantastic way to process all of that
Yes.
hardship and what must have been a
Yes.
really painful experience for you.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And it definitely kind of speaks to the sort of broader experience of the film, because as I mentioned, it's something innately peaceful, born of something innately traumatic. And it begins to make sense now, learning
Yeah.
that part of the past.
Now
Yeah.
it makes a little,
Yeah.
exactly. Now it really makes sense. But exactly.
And yeah, and so you were kind of getting this project together. So did you start to come up with it before the pandemic happened, or is it you started to come up with it during the actual pandemic?
No,
So
yes, like so Before the pandemic happened, I was really still playing tennis, full time. COVID-19 happened, and I was kind of just like, what is my next step? I wasn't actually really thinking what my next step was, but it was definitely a confusing moment in my life. Uh, it just kind of happened. I started writing because I always had, like many writers, I've always had these what you would maybe call visions, or just the need to write. I've always done that, but I never really looked too deep into it because I always wanted to be a professional tennis player.
Hmm.
However, in this moment in time, I was kind of like, okay, I want to be a screenwriter. I started writing a bunch of, I think I wrote a show first. Yes, I wrote a show first. And then I was like, this is pretty good. I wrote 3 episodes of it. Then I was like, well, nobody knows who I am. And I started to fall more and more in love with the process of writing, the process of filmmaking. I was reaching out to people online. How do I do this? What does this mean? I almost had my own film school because I didn't go to film school. And so in that, in that love, in that dedication and passion, I was like, I want to make my own short film just to prove who I am, because I can't go out and ask for money because nobody knows that I am a writer. Everybody knows me as an athlete. So I'm going to have to prove myself. So I picked up a few jobs in order to fund the film, and that's kind of my process for it. But how I came up with the theme for the film, I was like, everybody's going through this. Again, I see people struggling with being still. I see people struggling with dealing with the pandemic. And I've already experienced this once before, back when I got hit by the car. I was going through a lot of pain, had a really severe brain injury, had to go through that. So, as I said, my world was shut down.
Yeah.
So I was just trying to bring that into a way that people could relate to. I could also speak about it personally, and maybe
Yeah.
like people would be like, I kind of relate to this. I relate to this. And in whatever aspect of their life, maybe not even just the pandemic, there are themes that I feel like people can really connect to, that I write about in this film.
Excellent. I mean, it's just the whole movie in that context just seems like an incredible act of empathy. Instead of kind of turning everything on yourself, you're kind of, you're giving people something to focus on that conceptually they can relate to, as somebody who has had to go through something similar before the entire world simultaneously ran into the same kind of event, and that event being of a very specific nature would have presented its own specific problems, right? So, what were some of the logistical things you had to deal with making this with COVID restrictions in place?
Correct. That's good. So when I wrote it, that was another thing that I was like, okay, it's COVID-19. It needs to be a very small cast, and it needs to be outside, because I was also like fearful of, like, I don't want to get it. I also don't want to spread it and be like just someplace where I'm just making everybody get sick. So uh, that was one of the main things. I was like, okay, but also it made it cheaper for the film to just film it outside. Didn't have to rent any locations or anything like that. I was also thinking about having a small crew, but at the same time, the small crew was helpful for me because, again, affordability. So I came up with a lot of things. It was more so just thinking outside the box. Maybe it was a time thing, as far as like, it's going to take more time for me to put this together, right? It's going to be pushed back. You have to have a little bit more patience. But in this moment, everything kind of worked out, as far as having a small crew because we don't want to spread anything, making sure we have masks on set, making sure the boys are safe and healthy as well because they're young kids. So just making sure everybody is kind of following the protocols. You kind of had to play the role, especially with such a small film. Kind of have to play the role of like the COVID director. You know how they have the COVID-19 directors on set these days. And so have to make sure of that, have to make sure of keeping the film and everything moving forward. So there were a lot of moving parts and moving roles that I had to play. And also approaching the film, we had rehearsals with the little boys because they're not actors, and actually they're brothers. So it did work out. They're brothers for real in real life. So we did have rehearsals, but we rehearsed outside. So we rehearsed in the cold. We rehearsed through allergy season because, again, we didn't want to be inside. We didn't want to risk it for anybody because we just weren't sure how anything really worked. So it was a lot of just thinking ahead and being cautious of the
Yeah.
situation because it really was right in the middle of the pandemic.
Right. And
Mhm.
in that instance, you really got to be able to trust the people you're working with as well, I would
That's
imagine.
correct. You have
Um,
to.
yeah. So I mean, having the right team then becomes that much more important when you're dealing
Yes.
with something like COVID. Formulating the protocols that you have in place. Everybody needs to be on board with that, and they need to be committed to that. Um, and also, you mentioned the two boys that were in the movie are not actors, so you kind of have to communicate that to these young boys as well, who aren't necessarily used to the structure of a film set. So a lot of it kind of comes down to kind of building that team. So how did you go about getting the people on board that you have? Because firstly, the two boys who were in the movie are just so not well. The fact that they're brothers kind of makes it make sense, but they're just some kind of natural with each other in terms of
Right.
visually communicating a relationship that they have, and it's so
Right.
natural in front of the camera as well. And also
Right.
the way it's shot is just so beautiful. It's
Mhm.
just a beautiful film to look at. And of
Right.
course, because it's not the action isn't um, sort of ABCD continuous. You have to still find a through line through that. So you need to have a great editor on board as well. So you've got so many different disciplines working on in a sort of like non-conventional way. So how did you go about finding that team?
Right. Right. So starting with the cast, my mom tutored the boys. That was just she's been a volunteer tutor over like 40 years or so. So I picked them out. I was like, okay, again, I wanted it to be someone coming from the same home because of COVID-19. We rehearsed for 2 months, 5 days a week, 2 hours a day. So just to make sure that because in the beginning it was, we had our days, but just making them feel comfortable, making them really evoke that emotion. And then I went along and found the cinematographer, Alex Rivera. He's a beautiful, beautiful, as you could see, beautiful cinematographer. And he really knows his stuff. He really knows his stuff. He's from North Carolina as well. And he was just really on board with the vision of the film. He likes this type of filmmaking. It really suits his skills, shows off a lot of I believe all of our shots, if not most of them, were handheld. And it kind of gives you that immersive experience, right? Like you're right there on the journey with the boys. And he helped me a lot with getting the crew because I was new into the business. He helped me find my editor. He brought along his own assistant camera and gaffer. So that was pretty cool. I reached out to him. I literally was just on Instagram. I typed cinematography and I was just going through people's pages, one thing at a time, reached out to him. He liked the script, got on board together, went from there. And as far as the post production, I would reach out to a bunch of people, sent them the script, sent them our rough draft, and just kind of they were like, I'm on board. I love the script. And so my whole cast and crew, A+, so kind, so generous, and they really, really believed in the vision. And so I was really thankful for that because you do need a team that believes in the vision, even if they're good. If they don't believe in the vision, then it's not going to be,
That's
it's
true.
not going, you're not going to get the same result.
Yeah.
And they were most important is that they believed in the results of what we were trying to achieve.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. And how did you communicate that vision to them? Because obviously, that them being on board with that is super important. Obviously, they'll be professional and they'll do their jobs, but being able to bring your unique artistic eye based on your particular field to a vision once you understand it is super important. So how did you communicate that to them?
And I would say a lot of that is a part of the communication, just one on one with each person, right? That part, like you could have it in the script and they saw it in the script, but then even more when you're talking with them one on one, you're showing them different sounds that you hear as the director. Like, okay, this tone kind of gives me the feel of the film. This movement gives me the feel of the film, just things to make sure that they're understanding this is the vision that I want. This is the vision that I hope that we can come together and collaborate. And I also wanted them to have freedom to come to me and say, Aleah, I think this may work or this may work. So it was really a collaborative process. And I think that really helps. Instead of me just telling, I was very much so open to hearing, okay, I see this, I see that. But for the most part, just being very open with, I want this is how I feel. And I believe that each and every person on set was able to, on set and in post-production, were able to make those adjustments and come together and just be like, okay, this makes sense. I see what you're trying to do here. And I believe like open communication when you're making a film is extremely important.
So important. So important.
Extremely important. Yes.
Yeah. And yeah, holding the film together is its voiceover as well, which is difficult to make work in a lot of cases. A lot of people
Yes.
kind of fall back on it as a narrative crutch, but I think what makes this different is you're not using it for narrative purposes per se. I think it's more it more kind of sets the tone of this adventure that these two brothers are going on, and it really kind of has to strike the right mood and kind of put you in the right headspace. And it was a different actor that did the voiceover, right? Josiah
Yes.
Jennings was
Mm-hmm.
your voiceover artist.
Yes.
So how did you find Josiah? And again,
Yes.
what was
How
the
did that?
process of bringing him on board and getting the
That's
vision communicated
great.
to him?
Great question. Great question. So Josiah, originally the script did not have voiceover. When we filmed it, it did not have voiceover in it. But when I looked at the footage after, I was like, okay, we need to add something and we need to take something away. We weren't getting the full performances that we needed from the boys, although their body language was really showing it extremely well with their facial expressions and all of that. And so it was like, okay, how can we make this how can we make this a really good project? This is my first film, so I'm learning, I'm trying to figure it out, I'm trying a bunch of different things with it. And while the boys did amazing, I was like, I feel like we can add another layer to this to really bring it together so that it's like, okay, it's not just like an experimental project, it's a film. And so I rewrote it and I rewrote it and I rewrote it. I rewrote it maybe like 60 times just to get it right. And I was like, okay, it's gonna have voiceover. And I reached out to some local people. Actually, there's a high school in Durham, North Carolina called Hillside High School. And they throw on amazing plays. They're really good at theater. So I reached out to the theater director there. He directed me to Josiah, and we kind of just clicked. As soon as I heard his audition, I was like, he's the one. But I'm gonna keep going through the auditions just to see it all the way through. But I knew it as soon as I like turned my Zoom camera on and I was looking, I was like, this kid is the one. And I can hear it, I can feel it, I can see his passion for acting. 'Cause he's an actor. He is a real actor. And so that's how I found Josiah. And he was amazing. Young kid, very young kid. Yeah.
Fantastic. I think you did a great job. Really great
Yes.
job. Because I think a part of that whole narration
Mm-hmm.
is that it has to come from the mind of a child.
Mm,
And it
mm-hmm.
has to come from the perspective of a child, but it has to relay a real emotional complexity and
Correct.
philosophical depth that you would
Mm-hmm.
not expect from a child. But you can't just have like an
Right.
adult speaking with a
That,
child's voice. It's got to still. be that.
Exactly.
And I think his performance rides the line so well with that. I
Mm,
think
thank you.
that's one of the things that really makes the film. Um,
Mm.
what were some of his thoughts once he saw it? Once he saw how it came out, or all three of the boys, in fact, how did
Um,
they respond to it?
oh man, they loved it so much. They loved it so very much. I guess that was one of the most amazing things after was how much they loved it, how much they were dreaming big after the film, maybe wanting to go further, especially the two boys that were on camera. Josiah always wanted to be an actor, but even he was very much impressed with how it came with, and I think he was excited with the with the result of like, okay, I have something that I can say that, it turned out pretty good and it turned out pretty well. And so I'm happy that I was able to help in somebody else's dream because that's their dream. Not the two boys maybe as much, but they were one of the younger one is like, I want to be an actor now and all of that. But it's nice to be able to help and have people, I guess, continue to dream bigger and just be something to be a bridge to help move that forward.
Absolutely, absolutely. Because the experience of having acted and been in a movie that's been to festivals around the world,
Mm, mhm.
that's a big deal for a kid,
It's
right?
it's
And
awesome.
yeah, and yeah, okay, they may not ultimately decide to pursue acting, but the fact that they've done that means, okay, I
I
was
do a
in a
lot of
movie
things.
which went to different countries. What else can I do? What else am I ever
Exactly.
capable of? I
Exactly.
think that's a wonderful gift to give to a kid, actually.
Exactly. Yeah, I'm very very grateful for them and grateful for that as well.
Mm,
So, yeah.
wonderful, wonderful. And obviously, as we mentioned, we met at Aesthetica, so that's at
Yes.
least one of the places it's been. So where else have you been able to go with the film, and what has it been like traveling to different places with it?
It's been awesome because you get to meet a lot of different people. Aesthetica was amazing. I've never been to England before. I've gone to LA, but just seeing and I've been to LA before, but just seeing the film world and meeting new people that have been in this industry for a very long time. New York has gone to other places outside of the country, India. So I haven't been able to go to India though, but just being able to go to New York, going to LA, talking to other people about how this industry works, people appreciating your work, especially as a new filmmaker. It's been amazing just to be able to see how this short film went a bit I would say went a bit further than I first expected. I'm not sure I expected it to do so well, but once I had the final product, I was like, I'm gonna just try. I'm gonna just try and put it into festivals and see how it goes. 'Cause everything was so new to me, and very cool to be able to have traveled for this film and to have met so many people in such a quick amount of time.
Absolutely.
It's been a blessing for sure.
Yeah, yeah, and first movie out of the gate to
Yeah.
to kick it off with something this good.
Exactly.
It's
Exactly,
kind of the
exactly.
dream, to be honest with
Exactly,
you.
exactly,
Yeah,
exactly.
it was so good. It was so good.
Good, thank
So,
you. Thank you so much.
so once you decided, okay, you were going to make this film, you mentioned you hadn't been to film school, and that you reached out to the specific people who ended up on your team. Um, what were some of the biggest lessons you learned, or what were some of the major eye openers in terms of what your steps should be to make filmmaking sustainable for you? What were some of the things you learned that helped solidify that path for you?
I would say that, I learned so much, but I would say a lot of my skills like preparation, planning, the ability to adjust. You know, filmmaking is not after my first film, I realized that, you know, you have to be able to adjust and know that maybe it won't, and we'll see because it's my first one, but being able to adjust to the vision may be this, and actually it may turn out better than you first expected, right? But it's not gonna be exactly how it's written down, possibly. Again, this I'm still in the beginning, so we'll see how this advice or these learnings change. But I would definitely say that. However, as an athlete, the ability to adjust and all of these things, I think it helped play a role in what I learned as a filmmaker, because it's almost quite the same, right? Having to adjust things don't, and especially a tennis player, like you have to make these quick decisions. You have to prepare. You have to always be prepared. So it's like you can't forget a step per se. Um, but when it comes to the actual filmmaking process, I would say, like, you know, it depends on who the filmmaker is, because maybe someone likes visuals better than sound. Maybe someone likes sound better than this. I personally think that it's everything together. I do love sound. I love sound. But I do think everything needs to be on 100, in my opinion. Everybody needs to bring their A game in order to bring a good production, because that's why we like movies. That's why we like films. That's why we like storytelling. We don't want to miss a piece of it. And I do believe, like, if you're going to do something, it needs to be, everything counts. The color, the sound, the editing, everybody is important on set. And I think that is one of the main things, like, as well, that everybody has equal importance. While you may be the writer and director, the producer, I think that everybody has a major role into making good art. Good
Absolutely.
production. Yeah.
Absolutely. I mean, that's film is in my opinion at least one of the
Yes.
ultimate arts,
Oh yeah.
just because of the fact that it requires so many other arts to make it work, so many other crafts to make it work, and
Exactly.
so many practical professions as well.
Yes,
I
it
mean,
does. Yes.
on the creative end, you got people making music, you got people designing costumes, you got photography, you got acting, you got so many creative disciplines. On the practical side, you got electricians, you got builders, you got caterers, you got transport. So just
It's
so much goes
much,
into it.
so much stuff.
Yeah, yeah,
And I would say, yeah, it's like engineering, it's bringing everything together and coming up with something. So, yeah, I mean, I could say, like, oh, I learned this, I learned this. I learned a lot. We'd be here all day talking about everything that I learned because of that one experience, because it's taught me so much.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And you mentioned, some similarities, or some carryovers in terms of mentality, between being an athlete and transitioning to film. What are some of the other ways you think there are similarities between being an athlete and being a filmmaker? It's not a comparison I get to make very often, but
I will tell you, you're on your feet a lot on
yeah,
set. That is number one. You're on your feet a lot, which I
right,
realize. I think, like, after the first day, I was sitting in my bed and I was like going over my notes, like, okay, we're gonna shoot this tomorrow, shoot that, and I felt like my leg was like starting to cramp up. So, but no, it's the preparation. If you're a good filmmaker, it's the preparation, and I don't think it's just filmmaking. It's everything. Like, if you want it to be good, you're gonna have to prepare. And being an athlete, like, that's what you do 90% of the time. You were practicing nonstop. And I think that, okay, yes, you can prepare as much. The one thing that you can prepare as much as you want, there's still going to be adjustments that need to be made, like in a game or in a match or something. When you're on set and this, somebody's running late, or the camera, this angle is not as good as you thought. The sun is going down quicker, then there's so many things that you have to adjust and make those judgment calls, like, all right, we're gonna have to shoot this and let this be those quick decisions. And so I do think that's one thing that you just have to be willing to make those quick decisions. And that's kind of similar with being an athlete. I feel like that was the number one thing that I was like, oh my goodness, this is just the same as like playing tennis, right? You have to be able to make, and of course, this is a longer, sometimes people are standing thinking, we're trying different angles, trying to make something work. But if you're like shooting outside and you're racing against the sun, you may need to make a decision quicker than normal, right? Instead of just being inside. And it depends. It depends, really. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And in that context, then, big or small, what would you say have been some of your biggest victories along
Mhm.
your filmmaking journey, and what have been some of your biggest challenges?
The biggest victory is simply completing the film. Like that is the biggest victory because it's such a tedious process. It's a very, very tedious process. Again, that's something I learned as well. I feel like I'm learning every day about this journey. But making the film is my biggest victory. I'm very, very grateful. It's not. I'm thankful that it has gone to festivals and all of that, but just making a good film was that's my biggest victory so far. Um, yeah. And then my biggest challenge, the biggest challenge was the post-production process and just kind of knowing what to do, because that's where it's like, I think they say you shoot on set, like you film and then you make movies in post production. Like you record it, then you make a movie in post production. So the post production process, it can be challenging as well, just as far as like, okay, does this work or does this work? But it's also very fun. Just because it's challenging doesn't mean it's not fun.
Yeah, absolutely.
Um, and then when it comes to outside of making the films, the challenging of just continuing to grow and you know pitch for future projects and all of that. This business is very, very, it's fast paced, but it's also like once you get someone's ear, making sure you have all your stuff prepared, so that, hey, are you interested in this, something like that. So
Yeah, yeah. And this obviously being the beginning of your journey, there's probably limited frame of reference for this, but getting into film now, I'm sure you're aware that you're getting into a field where the landscape of it is changing rapidly, like all the time, in terms of the kind of technologies available, in terms of how a film gets seen, in terms of how accessible film festivals are, particularly when you're starting out. Um, what are and of course the fundamental hurdle for any filmmaker is funding. So yeah, you were obviously finding cost effective ways of doing the movie, but also ways which um, worked with the pandemic restrictions that you had to work within. But I would imagine it still would have required some kind of funding to do so. What were some of your experiences in terms of getting the money together to make it? Was it completely self funded? Were you able to access
right,
funding from any
it was
funding bodies, the US
right,
based? How did you
right.
go through that process?
Good question. Actually, for me, it was completely self funded. I picked up 3 jobs in order to fund the film because I didn't know anything about going out and getting the money for it. Also, I didn't feel like it would be proper if I was asked for like crowdfunding, because literally everybody in my life at that time knows me as an athlete. And so I would have been waiting forever. I didn't want to wait either. I just wanted to do it. So, and I felt like I wanted to prove myself. I felt like I wanted it to be something that I could support. It's like supporting yourself. Like, bet on yourself is what people say. And I was really betting on yeah. And I definitely wanted to bet on myself at that. So but it's not the way to go every time, right? This is what I've learned as well. I mean, like, well, I'm keep going back to that question that you asked. What have you learned so much? It's not the way to go all the time, if most of the time. So you learn that for the first project, yes, that's what I had to do. But moving forward, you realize that you would like for someone to have put their money into it, or several different entities to put their money into your project, because it kind of takes a big weight off of you. It's also kind of risky sometimes to put your own money into it, unless you're
Yeah.
just making an investment in the future. As a new filmmaker, I do believe that you put your money into a lot of your projects. That's just the way it is. I do believe that. Um, Not all your money, maybe you'll be able to get that funding, but make a smart investment, make a smart risk, or at least have something to support yourself to say, I don't want to wait too long. I want to go on and do it, because
Yeah.
like this film was able to go a lot of places in the world, and it has helped me for future projects. So I would say that I definitely got the investment, the return on investment, right? So it just depends. It depends on your situation. For me, as a new filmmaker, that's where I am, I would say.
Mm, mm. So yeah, I mean, funding obviously is that first big hurdle. But assuming you're able to leap over that and get the funds together that you need, and you're able to then go out and make your movie once you've actually got it. The biggest question that confronts a lot of filmmakers is what now, right? I mean, the initial stage is the film festival circuit. You submit there, you get into whatever you get into, you move on from whatever you don't get into. But once it's done and then you put it online, what's the next step from there? So with the access to short film having kind of exploded with um, the rise of platforms, like you got your short of the week, you got Omeletto, you got Film Shortage, you got a whole bunch of platforms. You got us.
Mhm. Yeah, exactly.
um,
Cameo launch,
yeah.
exactly.
The process of then deciding how you find your audience then becomes a lot more complex, right? You got to look into who is going to get you, the most amount of views, but also how do you stay in the minds of the audiences that you do reach. But what
Yes.
were some of the considerations you had going into that kind of a
That's
space?
such a good question, because that is like literally everything. What now? What do I do with it? This, that, and the other. It's something that I'm still asking. But what I did, I was like, I think that Vimeo is the best place for it to live as a filmmaker, because Vimeo has a nice platform. And right now I was just thinking, I'm gonna have to market it. Like, I'm gonna just have to keep posting it on my story, keep doing this. And it did well. But it's something that I'm also still learning and still processing, to be honest with you. Um, I feel like I feel like there's so many options. Of course, you want to try short of the week. Of course, you want to try Omeletto and all of that. And maybe it would get to that point where, okay, the next one you could do this, or maybe you did try short of the week and if they didn't accept it, or they just didn't want it. It just depends. So then you just need to put it somewhere so people can access it and
Yeah,
it can live somewhere, because it can't people can't know you if it's just hidden, right?
yeah,
So Vimeo was my place of choice, and I feel like it's done very well. If people get to know you as a person, be like, oh, you have it on each part of your socials, just so it's easily accessible. People can click it, they can watch it on their smartphone, they can watch it on their computer, and go from there. But it's definitely something like, how do I keep building? And I guess the next step would be, honestly, make another make
make
another
another movie,
film, make
right?
another movie, right? Because that
Yeah,
one's done, and then you keep promoting that work. But the next step is you're gonna have to make another one, because you can't just like live off of one forever, right? You just have to keep working, keep working, keep working. And I believe that each time you'll have more of a platform, no matter where it lives. So maybe it's on Vimeo, and the next one is on Cameo Launch. It's on this. So it just continues your path continues to grow the more you continue to create.
And in terms of the broader film landscape, just kind of touching on some of the platforms that we just mentioned, and the fact that you, as an individual filmmaker, have to promote yourself and your work and get people to notice you're there. What part do you think short film can play in the cinema landscape, the wider cinema landscape, with this sort of democratized access to
Yeah.
filming, to production, and to exhibition?
Right.
And what are the biggest challenges as a new filmmaker? What you find are the biggest challenges that face new filmmakers today, given that because so much of these resources are now so widely accessible, making your voice heard then becomes that much harder, even though you have the tools. So what are some of the ways, A, that short film can change that landscape, and B, the challenges you face as a new filmmaker?
I definitely think, one, how it can help is that short films can help people see who you are as an artist, right? If you can tell a short film, if you can tell a successful short film, people can be like, I really like that. Like, do they have any more work? A lot of times I'll do that when I'm like scrolling on different platforms, right? I want to see this or I want to see that. I feel like that is a good opportunity to maybe get the eyes of people who are like, okay, we want to support you on a feature film, or, because that has happened in the past for a lot of people. So it gives you an opportunity to make something not as big as a feature film, but it gives you an opportunity to get your film seen, right? It gives you an opportunity to get the support that you need for, hopefully, maybe what you want in the future, whether it's to be a feature director or to get into TV. It depends on each filmmaker's goal. But that being said, as you said, there's so many platforms and there's so many things being seen, so much content out there. So then it's like, how do you stand out? Again, I truly believe that it's in the consistency. I truly believe that it's also trying your best. And I don't think that it's one way or the other, because it is a challenge. It's like, do this, and then everybody does this, and then here comes one person and they do something different. It's like, yeah, they're amazing, right? I do believe that it's just staying consistent and what path fits you. Because not everybody may not be able to go to or put their film in film festivals. They may just be able to put it online, but you never know. Like, somebody may see it and they're like, oh my goodness, and then it blows up, right? You just have to be consistent, regardless of what the path is. Be consistent. Keep putting one foot in front of the other. And like I said, when you do that, things start to open up. You just can't stop. I think that was like, I don't know if you guys are familiar with it in England, like Diddy said, can't stop, won't stop, right? So you just have to you have to keep doing that, right? Or else then you'll have a problem, because it's true. There's so many films out there. How will you be seen? The best you can do is market yourself, support yourself, bet on yourself, and keep pushing forward. And try different avenues, maybe. Try different things. Try reaching out to different people, getting more people on your side, getting advocates, right? So you kind of also have to be a business person as well.
Yes,
right.
True. Be
Yeah.
very aware of how the business of film works.
Yeah, exactly.
Be aware of what audiences are looking at, and the best people to reach out to in terms of stuff like that are film distributors, which these are the people that you're going to need to know if you intend to make a feature film at some point. And that's fantastic advice for filmmakers coming up and coming through now. Thank you for sharing that. So what's next for you? What's the next project you're working on?
Right. So I'm currently writing another short film. Currently writing it. Can't tell the world just yet, because that's just not how I roll. But
sure.
I am currently working on another short film right now, hoping to shoot it in December or early next year, but hoping to shoot it in December. Working on this it's been just something to continue to improve in the craft, continue to tell stories that I want to tell,
Yeah.
and hoping that it can get the right eyes on it at some point. But right now, I'm in the spot where it's just like, let's make it something that I like, and I hope that you guys like it from there. From
Yeah.
there, you
Yeah.
know? Yeah.
Yeah, well, I think you're fine. You're definitely off to a great start.
Thank you.
We'll certainly be looking
Thank you.
for
Thank
the
you.
next thing, the next
I
project once
appreciate it.
it's available.
I
And where
appreciate
can people find you or follow you online?
Yes. So they can find me on Instagram, Aleah Marrow, Aleah Marrow, like bone marrow, Marrow. And that's on my Instagram. That's on my Twitter. I also have a LinkedIn. And from there, you will be able to see all my links to my Vimeo. It should be the same on Vimeo, Aleah Marrow, Wish Hill. Type that in, that will pop up. I have my email accessible to everybody. And yeah, they can find me there.
Brilliant, brilliant. And we have also included a link in the description to
Awesome.
our review of Wish Hill, and you can
Thank you
also
so
find
much.
the movie itself through that review as well. And to all viewers, listeners, wherever you may be, if you want to keep up to date with all things short film and new developments on Cameo Launch, head to cameolaunch.com. All our reviews can be found on cameolaunch.com/reviews. Podcasts and episodes like this one can be found on cameolaunch.com/podcast, and you can subscribe to the podcast on your favorite platform, from Apple Podcasts to Amazon Music to Spotify, wherever you feel comfortable. And also, you can stay up to date with us by following us on the socials. That's at Cameo Launch on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, and X now, I guess. And
I'm not
yeah,
even.
and
Oh yeah,
also eggs. Yeah, that's that one.
I
We're gonna have
did
to
see Twitter. Yeah, I'm not quite used to it yet. Got
get
it.
into the habit of that one. Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
exactly.
But also, you can stay up to date via our newsletter, which you can sign up to by going to cameolaunch.com. But Aleah, thank you so much once again for joining us today. Thank you for sharing your experiences with us and just such amazing insights as well. We wish you all of the best and congratulations
Yeah,
on Wish Hill. And
thank
we
you.
look forward to seeing more of your work in the future.
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
No problem. The pleasure is all ours. And to everybody else, you all stay safe, and we'll see you next time.